Chapter 25 is about laws of debtor, creditor, relations, and consumer protection. A creditor is defined as the lender in a transaction. The debtor is the borrower in a transaction. A lien is a claim on a debtor's property that must be satisfied before any creditor can make a claim. A mechanic's lien is a lien placed on the real property of a debtor when the latter does not pay for the work done by the creditor. Artisan's lien is a lien that enables a creditor to recover payment from a debtor for labor and services provided on the debtor's personal property, like fixing a lawnmower. Attachment, a court-ordered judgment allowing a local officer of the court to seize property of a debtor. Writ of execution is an order by a clerk of the court directing the sheriff to seize any of the non-exempt real or personal property of a debtor who refuses to or cannot pay a creditor. Garnishment is an order of the court granted to a creditor to seize wages or bank accounts of a debtor. Suretyship is a contract between a third party and a creditor that allows the third party to pay the debt of the debtor. The surety is primarily liable. Guarantee, similar to a suretyship, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, except that the third person is secondarily liable, which means they're required to pay only after the debtor has defaulted. Exemptions to attachments is a homestead exemption is defined as purpose to prevent a person from losing their home. Excuse me. They also talked about provisions to the bankruptcy code. Bankruptcy petition, voluntary followed by debtor would be Chapter 7, Chapter 11, 12, and 13. Involuntary would be where the creditor places the debtor in bankruptcy. Chapter 7, bankruptcy, is called straight bankruptcy, where the debtor turns over all assets to a trustee, and the trustee sells the non-exempt assets and distributes the proceeds to creditors, and the remaining debts are discharged. Discharge of debts means discharge is enabling the debtor to say that it is no longer legally responsible for paying certain claims by creditors on unsecured debts. Statutory distribution of property. If a debtor qualifies for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the non-exempt property of the bankruptcy estate must be distributed to secured and unsecured creditors. Chapter 13, a portion of the consumer debtor's earnings is paid into the court for distribution to creditors over 3 years or, with court approval, over 5 years. Only voluntary petitions for bankruptcy may be filed under this chapter. Creditors cannot force petitioner into Chapter 13. Often, creditors agree to a composition plan whereby each creditor receives a percentage of what the debtor owes in exchange for releasing the debtor from the debt. Individuals filing under Chapter 11 is reorganization. They had a reorganization under the 2005 Act. It states that the plan for payment to creditors must provide for the payment of a portion of the debtor's earnings from personal services that are earned after commencement of the case. Payments must be made by the debtor under the plan and be completed before the court will grant a discharge of any unpaid debts to the debtor. Small business bankruptcy is defined as a test track. It says Chapter 11 exists for small businesses if their liabilities do not exceed $2 million and they do not own or manage real property. Chapter 12 bankruptcy is for family farmers and fishermen. They have a right to file for bankruptcy, reorganization. Under the code, a debtor can convert a Chapter 12 reorganization to a Chapter 7 at any time. A Chapter 12 discharge, after all payments are made by a farmer or fisherman debtor, usually over a period of 3 years. The new bankruptcy law, 2011, is an amendment. Corrections that they made were power of the court was the first one. The second one was public access to the papers. And the third one was debtor reporting requirements. And the fourth one is case administration. And the fifth one was priorities of creditors' claims. Then they went on to talk about freedom to contract doctrine. Parties who are legally competent are allowed to enter into whatever contracts they wish. Puffery, an exaggerated recommendation made in a sales talk to promote the product. A testimonial is a statement by a public figure professing the merits of some product or service. Full warranty under the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act. It's a written protection for buyers that guarantees free repair of a defective product. If the product cannot be fixed, the consumer must be given a choice of a refund or a replacement free of charge. A limited warranty under the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act is any written warranty that does not meet the conditions of a full warranty. Regulation Z is a group of rules set forth by the Federal Reserve Board to implement some provisions of the Truth in Lending Act, requiring lenders to disclose certain information to borrowers. Annual percentage rate, the effective annual percentage rate of interest being charged a consumer by a creditor that depends on the compounding period of the creditor is using. Open-end credit. Credit extended on an account for an indefinite time period so that the debtor can keep charging on the account up to a certain amount while paying the outstanding balance either in full or in installment payments. A closed-end credit is a credit arrangement in which credit is extended for a specific period of time and the exact number of payments and the total amount due have been agreed upon between the borrower and the creditor. Fair Credit Billing Act. Fair Debt Collections Practice Act was also mentioned. And then they talked about Dodd-Frank Act, which says the Federal Reserve Board will determine what constitutes a reasonable and proportional fee for debit card transactions. I am somewhat familiar with this chapter. I myself have never filed for bankruptcy. I do pride myself on my credit score. It is something that I've worked very hard to achieve. I pay my debts. I make sure that I think long and hard about making purchases. You know, one of the things that I really had to figure out was, is it worth it for me to go back to college after all these years? What benefit am I going to get out of achieving my bachelor's degree? I was this close to getting it, 25 years ago, and I took a break because I needed to work full-time and I had bills to pay, and going to school full-time and working full-time didn't work for me at that time. And I had to weigh out the pros and the cons of the debt and would it be worth it to go back. And that's just like the home that I bought on my own when I was 30 years old and the cars that I've bought on my own. I've taken into consideration all of those purchases, and I know the importance of earning a dollar and, spending that dollar wisely. As far as creditors and debtors, I'm extremely familiar with how that works as far as debt collections go. I have been a debt collector. I was a debt collector for quite some time until the company actually closed. We didn't report on credit, and we didn't pursue legally. I talked to multiple creditors every day. I worked out pay arrangements with them. I treated them like human beings and could, talk to them in a way that made them feel comfortable to want to pay their debt back in a timely manner, understanding that it was, life happens and we understand that, so we're going to help you get this taken care of. So, that's my familiarity with this chapter. It was interesting to see all the different laws and different things that have come up, of course, that I wasn't aware of, and the fact that they do have those options available for people who can't pay off their debt. And there is my recap for the final chapter, chapter 25.